He didn't run from the police. He ran away from her. A woman in a dark shawl, standing at the end of the alley like she'd been waiting since 1888. And when he looked at her, he started screaming, not the scream of a man caught, the scream of a man recognized. And so, here is the question that haunts history. What if Jack the Ripper was never caught? Because the ghost of Annie Chapman found him first. Stay with me, because by the end you'll understand what Annie did to him in the dark, and why the Ripper didn't disappear. In that moment, he broke. This is a late-night warning story, not a history lesson, not a neat solution. It's about guilt that grows teeth, about a city that swallowed screams, and about one victim who refused to stay a victim. It's about guilt that grows teeth, about a city that swallowed screams, and about one victim who refused to stay a victim. We're going to walk through one night in Whitechapel, the turning point, the worst moment, what it cost the man they called Jack, and what followed after the killing stopped. One rule before we start: if you're watching this alone late at night, don't look behind you when I say her name. Not because you'll see her, because you might hear her. Whitechapel, 1888. The air was coal smoke and damp wool. The streets were crowded, but somehow still lonely. And the dark didn't feel empty, it felt occupied. Annie Chapman was the second of the canonical victims, found in the yard behind 29 Hanbury Street. Early morning. Quiet, too quiet. People talk about the killer, but they don't talk about what happened after, because the first whisper wasn't heard by a policeman. It was heard by a woman who lived 2 doors down. She said she woke up to a voice in her room. Not loud, not angry, just close. It said, "He'll do it again." She told her husband, he told her to stop talking nonsense, and the next week it happened again. After Annie, the papers got hungry, the letters started, the city started locking its doors. And the killer started making mistakes, not sloppy mistakes, human ones. A constable later swore he saw a man in a long coat near Spitalfields. He said the man was talking to someone, but there was no one there, just empty air. And the man kept nodding, like he was being instructed. Then came the first clear escalation. A witness heard a scream, not from a victim, from a man. A man shouting, "Stop following me." The witness looked out, saw a man stumble into the street, and behind him a shape, a woman's shape. Dark shawl, still, watching. The witness blinked. The woman was gone, but the man was on his knees, retching, and he kept scraping at his own hands, like he couldn't get something off. That's when the story changes, because Jack didn't just hunt, he started being hunted. And the night ended on a detail nobody could explain. A fresh set of footprints in mud. 2 sets, one man's boots and one pair of bare feet, leading nowhere. Here's what we know so far. Annie Chapman dies. A whisper predicts the next. A man starts talking to empty air. Bare footprints appear behind him. And the killer begins to unravel. The worst part happened weeks later, not in a yard, not in a doorway, but in a rented room above a butcher's shop, a place that stank of iron and cold fat. A landlord found the tenant sitting in the dark, no candle, no fire, just a man staring at the corner, smiling like he'd been told a joke. The landlord asked if he was ill. The man said, "She's here." Soft question for you. If someone told you a ghost was in the room with them, would you look where they're looking? Because the landlord did, and he saw nothing. At first, then the temperature dropped. Not a chill, a plunge, like the room had been opened to a cellar. The man began to speak, not to the landlord, to the corner, apologizing, begging, promising he'd stop. Not a chill, a plunge, like the room had been opened to a cellar. The man began to speak, not to the landlord, to the corner, apologizing, begging, promising he'd stop. The landlord ran, down the stairs, out into the street. The landlord ran, down the stairs, out into the street. And when he came back with help, the room was empty, the window was shut, the door was locked from the inside, and on the floor, scratched into the boards, were 2 words. Here's my verdict. Jack the Ripper wasn't caught because he didn't keep killing. He couldn't. Something got inside his routine, inside his confidence, inside his head. Annie Chapman didn't haunt Whitechapel. She haunted him. She followed him through streets, through locked doors, through rooms that should have been safe. And she didn't need chains rattling. She used memory. She used names. She used the sound of bare feet behind him. What still doesn't feel right is the ending, because the killings stopped, but the sightings didn't. For months after, people in Whitechapel reported a woman in a dark shawl, standing at the mouth of alleys, watching men who walked alone, not attacking, just choosing. Remember the opening? He ran from her. Here's the callback. A final report surfaced years later. A man found in a room, dead of fright. No wounds, no struggle, just his fingernails torn to the quick, as if he'd tried to scratch something off his own skin. And on the wall above the bed, written in shaking hand, Annie, I see you. So here's my question for you. Do you think Annie Chapman stopped the Ripper, or did she become something worse than him?